Welcome back to Nighttime History, where we journey together through the quiet corridors of the past. Tonight we are stepping into the gentle morning light of ancient Rome, into a fresco workshop as dawn breaks over the seven hills. Thank you for joining me on this peaceful exploration of one of history's most beautiful and misunderstood arts. As you settle into your favorite spot, let the soft sounds of grinding pigment and whispered instructions carry you back nearly 2,000 years, to a time when walls came alive with colour and story. The first pale light of dawn filters through the narrow windows of the workshop, casting long shadows across the stone floor. You can hear the soft shuffle of leather sandals as the youngest apprentices enter through the heavy wooden door. The air carries the earthy scent of wet plaster mixed with something sharper, the metallic tang of ground minerals waiting to become colour. Most people think Roman frescoes were painted by famous artists signing their masterpieces, but actually these workshops buzzed with dozens of unnamed craftsmen working as a team. The master painter might design the overall scene, but skilled hands at every level brought the vision to life. An apprentice who spent months learning to grind lapis lazuli into the perfect shade of blue was just as crucial as the artist who painted Jupiter's robes. The workshop stirs to life with practiced routine. Near the back wall, two apprentices kneel beside shallow stone mortars, their bronze pestles already beginning the rhythmic grinding that will continue throughout the day. The sound creates a gentle percussion, metal against stone, as they work precious minerals into powder, fine enough to paint with. One works cinnabar, the brilliant red mercury ore that travelled here from distant Spanish mines. The other grinds Egyptian blue, that miraculous artificial pigment the Romans perfected, more vibrant than any natural stone. You can smell the lime mortar being mixed near the far corner, where older apprentices measure water with careful precision. The mortar must be exactly right, not too wet or too dry, because once it touches the wall, time becomes the enemy. Fresco means fresh in Italian, and fresh is exactly what the plaster must be when pigment meets surface. The chemical marriage between lime and colour can only happen while moisture still lives in the wall. Steam rises gently from buckets of warm water used to clean brushes from yesterday's work. The boar hair bristles, stiff when dry, soften as they soak. These brushes came from wild pigs in the forests north of Rome, their coarse hair perfect for the bold strokes needed on wet plaster. Finer brushes, made from the tail hair of expensive horses, wait wrapped in linen for the detail work that will come later. The master painter enters as the first hour of daylight strengthens. His tunic is already stained with yesterday's colours, a walking palette that tells the story of his current commission. He moves between the workstations, checking the consistency of mixed pigments with practiced fingers, nodding approval at properly prepared brushes, adjusting the angle of a wooden board where apprentices practice their brush strokes. Against the east wall, yesterday's work waits for morning inspection. The intonaco, that final layer of lime plaster, dried overnight into a surface as smooth as marble. Colours that seemed vibrant when wet have settled into their permanent tones. The master runs his palm across the surface, feeling for any roughness that might need smoothing before today's work continues. You notice how the workshop operates in layers, just like the frescoes themselves. The youngest apprentices handle the roughest tasks, mixing sand and lime for the foundational auricchio layer that will never be seen but must be perfectly strong. Slightly older workers prepare the brown coat, the middle layer that provides the smooth base for painting. Only the most experienced hands apply the final intonaco, spreading it in sections just large enough to paint before it dries. The social structure here mirrors Roman society itself, but with an interesting twist. While birth and family connections mattered everywhere else in Roman life, the fresco workshop operated more like a guild. Skill earned respect, and apprentices who showed exceptional talent with colour mixing might advance faster than one from a wealthy family who struggled with the craft. The master painter's approval meant everything, regardless of your father's status in the forum. Light from the windows grows stronger, illuminating shelves lined with ceramic pots and bronze containers. Each holds a different treasure. Yellow ochre from Greek hillsides sits beside green earth from Italian mountains. Imported indigo, worth its weight in silver, rests in a locked chest that only the master opens. Purple, that royal colour made from thousands of crushed murex shells, waits in a container smaller than your palm, but more valuable than most Romans earned in a year. The apprentices begin their daily ritual of colour preparation. This process fascinates because it combines art with ancient chemistry. They know that heating yellow ochre transforms it to red, though they cannot explain why iron oxide changes its crystal structure under heat. They understand that mixing certain pigments creates muddy disasters, while others blend into colours that seem to glow from within the wall. Let us stop here for a moment. If you are enjoying this peaceful journey through ancient Rome, I invite you to join our community of nighttime travelers by subscribing to Nighttime History and turning on notifications so you never miss our quiet explorations of the past. A gentle like helps support the channel and lets others discover these calming historical stories. In the comments below, let us know where you are settling in to sleep tonight and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, let us return to the Awakening workshop. The grinding continues, steady and meditative. You watch an apprentice work malachite, the green copper ore that must be ground by hand because heat would destroy its colour. His movements are practiced, almost dance-like, as he leans into each stroke of the pestle. Too much pressure and the mineral shatters into useless dust. Too little and the particles remain too coarse to paint smoothly. The technique passed from master to student for generations, refined through countless mornings exactly like this one. Near the mixing table, another apprentice prepares the binding medium that will carry pigment to wall. Most people imagine fresco paint as we know paint today, but actually the pigments mix only with water. The magic happens when wet pigment meets wet lime plaster. As the wall dries, calcium hydroxide in the lime converts to calcium carbonate, creating a chemical bond that locks the colour permanently into the surface. The paint becomes part of the wall itself, not just a coating applied on top. The master assigns today's work sections. Villa walls required careful planning because wealthy Romans expected perfection. A dining room might feature an elaborate garden scene with dozens of different plants, each requiring its own mixture of greens and browns. A bedroom could showcase mythological lovers painted with flesh tones that seemed to breathe in lamplight. Every colour had to be precisely matched from one day's work to the next, even though natural pigments varied slightly from batch to batch. You can hear the soft scratch of charcoal on wall as an artist transfers yesterday's preparatory drawing onto fresh plaster. These cartoons, full-scale drawings on papyrus or parchment, allowed workshops to repeat popular designs for different clients. A successful composition of dancing maenads or hunting scenes might be copied dozens of times across Roman villas, each version slightly adapted to fit the specific wall dimensions. The workshop fills with the quiet concentration of skilled hands at work. Unlike the noisy chaos of a blacksmith shop or the haggling voices of the market, fresco workshops maintained an almost temple-like atmosphere. Concentration was essential because mistakes could not be painted over. If an apprentice applied the wrong colour or made an error in drawing, that section of expensive plaster had to be scraped away and begun again. Temperature and humidity affected every aspect of the work. On hot, dry days, the plaster dried too quickly, forcing painters to work in smaller sections. Humid weather allowed more time, but risked colours bleeding into each other before they set. The master painter read weather conditions like a sailor reads wind and waves, adjusting the day's ambitious plans to match what nature would allow. As morning progresses, the workshop settles into its productive rhythm. The sound of grinding gradually gives way to the whisper of brushes on wet plaster. Colours bloom to life on the wall as apprentices block in large areas of background, their movements confident from years of practice. The scent of wet lime mingles with pigment dust floating in golden shafts of sunlight. The Roman fresco workshop represents something beautiful about human creativity. In a world often focused on conquest and politics, these quiet rooms dedicated themselves entirely to making spaces more beautiful. Every day, skilled hands transformed blank walls into windows, opening onto imaginary gardens, mythological realms, and architectural fantasies that made small rooms feel infinite. The master painter moves through the workshop with the quiet authority of someone who understands that respect must be earned daily through demonstration, not decree. His weathered hands still bear traces of yesterday's ultramarine, the expensive blue that marks his status as clearly as any toga stripe. You notice how apprentices pause their work as he approaches, not from fear, but from genuine desire to learn from his observations. The hierarchy here follows patterns more complex than most Romans would recognize. While the city outside operates on the rigid lines of patrician and plebeian, citizen and slave, the fresco workshop creates its own social ladder based entirely on skill and artistic understanding. A master painter might have been born a slave, yet command the workshop where freeborn Romans grind his pigments. Talent transcended birth in ways that shocked proper Roman society. Watch how the youngest apprentice, perhaps 8 years old, carries water buckets with careful concentration. His small hands have already learned to feel the difference between water that is too warm, which would cause plaster to set too quickly, and water that is too cold, which would prevent proper chemical bonding. This child possesses knowledge that many wealthy Romans would pay handsomely to understand, yet he earns perhaps a few coins and his daily bread. The colour grinders occupy the next level in this careful hierarchy. Their muscled forearms tell stories of thousands of hours crushing minerals into powder fine enough to catch light. You can hear the steady rhythm as one works Egyptian blue, a pigment so prized that some workshops guarded their supply more carefully than gold. These craftsmen understand the personality of every mineral, how long to grind each one, which combinations create harmony and which spell disaster. Most people think apprentices learned by copying simple patterns, but actually they began by mastering the invisible foundation work that made great frescoes possible. A second-year apprentice might spend months learning to apply the orecchio, that rough first layer of plaster mixed with sand and chopped straw. His hands learned to feel when the mixture held exactly the right amount of moisture, when the surface was properly prepared to receive the next layer. This knowledge took years to master, yet received no recognition outside the workshop walls. The Cinnabar artists hold special status in this hierarchy. These skilled draftsmen create the preparatory drawings that guide all other work. You watch one now, his charcoal moving confidently across the dried arricchio layer as he sketches the outline of a garden scene. His understanding of proportion and perspective rivals any architect, yet Roman society never recognized drawing as a legitimate art form. These men possessed skills that wealthy Romans hired, but never acknowledged as equal to sculpture or poetry. The workshop's social dynamics shift subtly as different projects demand different expertise. During work requiring complex architectural perspective, the cynopia artist commands respect equal to the master painter. When delicate flesh tones need mixing, the senior color specialist's opinion carries enormous weight. You notice how the master painter defers to expertise without losing face, a political skill as refined as any senator's. Middle-level apprentices handled a crucial brown coat application, that smooth intermediate layer between rough foundation and final painting surface. Their technique determines whether the finished fresco will last decades or begin flaking within seasons. These craftsmen understand lime chemistry better than most Roman physicians understand human anatomy. They know that too much sand weakens the mixture, too little makes it crack as it dries, and the wrong type of lime creates colours that fade within years. The payment structure reveals fascinating social complexities. Masters negotiate contracts with wealthy clients, but workshop earnings flow through multiple levels of the hierarchy. Senior apprentices might receive a percentage of profits from jobs they helped complete. Color specialists earned bonuses when their mixtures achieved particularly stunning effects. Even the youngest water carriers received small coins when projects finished successfully, teaching them that excellence benefits everyone. You observe subtle signs of rank everywhere in the workspace. The master painter's brushes hang on individual hooks carved from ivory, while apprentices share communal sets stored in simple wooden boxes. Pigment storage follows strict protocols based on value and responsibility level. Common earth colors sit within reach of any apprentice, but precious ultramarine and purple remain locked away, distributed in tiny portions only when needed for specific areas. The learning process unfolds in carefully structured stages that might surprise modern observers. New apprentices spent their first year never touching a brush to wall plaster. Instead, they practiced brush control on broken pottery shards, learning to make smooth strokes and clean lines on surfaces that cost nothing to waste. They memorized the properties of dozens of pigments through repetitive exercises that seemed mindless but built crucial muscle memory. Most people imagine Roman workshops as places where young boys swept floors and mixed colours, but actually many included skilled female workers whose contributions were carefully hidden from public view. Women often possessed superior colour sensitivity and fine motor control that made them exceptional at detailed work. They entered workshops through family connections, daughters or wives of established craftsmen, and their expertise was valued even as social convention prevented official recognition. The advancement system operated more like mystery schools than simple job training. Knowledge passed down through demonstration and careful observation rather than written instruction. A colour grinder earned promotion to brown coat specialist, not through time served but by demonstrating perfect understanding of lime chemistry through successful application. The master painter watched for signs of readiness, moments when an apprentice showed not just technical skill but artistic intuition. You notice how different personality types find their natural roles within the hierarchy. Patient, methodical workers gravitate toward pigment preparation, where consistency matters more than inspiration. Those with steady hands and sharp eyes advance toward detail work, adding the delicate touches that bring painted figures to life. Natural leaders emerge as section supervisors, coordinating the work of multiple apprentices on large wall compositions. The master painter's role extends far beyond artistic vision. He functions as educator, psychologist, business manager, and quality control supervisor simultaneously. Watch him now as he demonstrates proper brush loading technique to a struggling apprentice. His movements are economical, purposeful, honed by decades of practice. He shows rather than explains, understanding that motor skills develop through imitation and repetition. Workshop discipline maintains itself through peer pressure and shared responsibility rather than harsh punishment. A careless apprentice who wastes expensive pigment faces the disappointed silence of colleagues who understand the material's true cost. Someone who applies plaster poorly creates problems that affect everyone's work for days to come. This collective accountability creates standards higher than any external authority could impose. The tool hierarchy reflects and reinforces social structure within the workshop. Bronze mixing bowls belong to senior colour specialists who earned them through years of faithful service. Iron tools for wall preparation pass between middle-level workers based on immediate needs. The master painter's personal brushes, some made from rare foxhair imported from northern Gaul, represent both practical tools and symbols of achieved status. Economic relationships within the workshop challenge simple assumptions about Roman class structure. Some apprentices came from wealthy families seeking artistic training for their sons, paying workshop fees while learning alongside slave-born children who showed exceptional talent. Merit ultimately determined advancement, but family connections could accelerate the process or provide second chances after mistakes. The morning light reveals walls covered with practice exercises from apprentices at various skill levels. Simple geometric patterns show beginning brush control. More complex studies of human hands and faces demonstrate advancing capability. The walls themselves become teaching tools, examples of technique preserved for future students to study and imitate. You can hear quiet conversations between workers as they collaborate on color matching. Two specialists debate whether adding a tiny amount of red ochre to yellow will achieve the exact shade of autumn leaves requested by their current client. Their discussion reveals deep understanding of how pigments interact, knowledge gained through years of experimentation and careful observation of successful combinations. The workshop's hierarchy created stability in an uncertain world. Apprentices knew that dedication and skill would eventually earn them advancement, regardless of birth circumstances. Masters understood that their reputation depended on training excellent successors who would carry forward workshop traditions and maintain quality standards. This mutual dependence created bonds stronger than simple employer-employee relationships. Senior apprentices begin preparing today's intonaco, that crucial final plaster layer that must be applied, painted, and completed before evening. They measure lime putty aged for months in covered pits, combining it with marble dust ground so fine it feels like silk between your fingers. The mixture must achieve perfect smoothness, because any grit or inconsistency will show in the finished painting. The master painter inspects colour samples prepared yesterday, holding small pottery shards painted with test mixtures up to the morning light. Roman clients demanded that interior frescoes maintain consistent colour temperature throughout their homes. A blue that looked perfect in the workshop might appear too warm or too cold when installed in the actual room. requiring careful adjustment of pigment ratios. As the workshop reaches full activity, you begin to understand that these craftsmen were preserving and advancing one of humanity's most sophisticated painting techniques. The chemical knowledge required to create lasting frescoes surpassed what most Roman physicians understood about medicine. The artistic skills needed to paint convincing three-dimensional space on flat walls rivaled the mathematical knowledge of Roman engineers. Yet society valued these workshops primarily as sources of decoration, missing the profound technical and artistic achievements happening within their walls. The storage room at the back of the workshop holds treasures that rival any Roman temple's sacred objects. Clay vessels sealed with beeswax line wooden shelves, each containing pigments worth more than most citizens earn in a lifetime. You can smell the exotic scents that drift from these containers, hints of distant lands and dangerous journeys that brought these materials across the empire and beyond its borders. An apprentice carefully opens a small bronze container, revealing cinnabar in its raw crystalline form. The brilliant red mercury sulfide crystals catch the morning light like drops of frozen blood. Most people think this pigment came from common red clay, but actually cinnabar deposits were so rare and valuable that Roman armies fought wars to control the mines in distant Spain. The mercury content made grinding dangerous work, causing tremors and madness in workers who handled it carelessly over many years. The master painter approaches the locked chest that contains the workshop's most precious materials. His bronze key turns with a soft click, revealing compartments lined with silk cloth from the distant east. Inside, small ceramic pots hold ultramarine made from lapis lazuli, that legendary blue stone more valuable than gold. The pigment glows with an otherworldly intensity, as if it contains captured sky itself. You watch as he measures out a portion barely larger than a walnut, enough blue to paint perhaps one figure's robes in today's work. This tiny amount represents months of an average Roman worker's wages. The lapis lazuli travelled over 4,000 miles from the remote Sari-Sang mines in what we now call Afghanistan, carried by traders who risked bandits, storms, and political upheaval to bring this treasure to Roman workshops. The grinding of lapis lazuli requires techniques passed down through generations of workshop masters. Too much pressure destroys the crystal structure that creates the pigment's luminous quality. Too little leaves particles too coarse to paint smoothly. The apprentice assigned this precious task has spent 2 years learning the precise rhythm, the exact angle of the pestle, the moment when the grinding sound changes to indicate perfect fineness. Near the colour preparation area, another apprentice works with orpiment, the brilliant yellow arsenic sulfide that glows like captured sunlight. The mineral arrives in chunks that look like molten gold frozen in stone. Roman writers called it aure pigmentum, meaning gold paint, though they never understood its true chemical nature. The workshop treats orpiment with special respect, not just for its beauty, but for its toxicity. Extended exposure causes hair loss, stomach illness, and eventual death. Most people imagine ancient painters mixed colours casually like artists today, but actually, Roman workshops followed recipes as precise as those used by physicians or priests. A master colour specialist consults wooden tablets covered with notes written in a secret shorthand, developed within the workshop tradition. These formulations specify exact ratios, grinding times, and mixing procedures for hundreds of different hues. The creation of Egyptian blue fascinates because it represents one of humanity's first artificial pigments. You observe an apprentice preparing the raw materials for a batch, measuring copper ore, sand, lime, and natron in proportions perfected over centuries of experimentation. The mixture must be heated to temperatures hot enough to melt copper, requiring specialized furnaces and skilled fire management. The resulting glass-like material, when ground to powder, produces a blue more brilliant than any natural stone. The workshop's collection includes pigments that challenge everything Romans thought they knew about the natural world. Ralgar, the orange-red arsenic sulfide, appears to change color in different light conditions, glowing almost supernaturally in lamplight. Lead white, created by exposing lead sheets to vinegar vapor for months, produces the most brilliant white available, but slowly poisons anyone who handles it regularly. These materials possessed powers that seemed almost magical to people who lacked modern chemical understanding. You can hear the soft scraping sounds as apprentices prepare organic pigments from plant and animal sources. Madder root, imported from distant Anatolia, must be processed through complex steps to extract its deep red dye. The roots soak in lime water for days, then undergo heating and filtering processes that transform woody plant matter into liquid color. The final pigment glows with warmth that mineral reds cannot match. The purple workshop holds in such reverence comes from creatures most Romans never see alive. Murex shells from Mediterranean waters yield their color only through a process more complex than most Roman manufacturing. Thousands of shells must be crushed and left to ferment in the sun, creating a smell so terrible that purple dye workshops were banished to remote coastal areas. The resulting pigment was reserved for imperial robes and the most sacred religious paintings. Green pigments reveal the workshop's sophisticated understanding of copper chemistry. Verdigris, the blue-green patina that forms on copper exposed to vinegar, can be harvested and processed into paint. Malachite, the natural copper carbonate, provides a different green with unique optical properties. Chrysocolla, the copper silicate found in desert regions, creates yet another shade. Each copper-based green behaves differently when mixed with other colors, requiring separate techniques and applications. The preparation of flesh tones demonstrates the workshop's most subtle color knowledge. Roman clients demanded painted figures that seemed to breathe with life, requiring pigment mixtures that captured the complex undertones of living skin. Base mixtures of lead, white and red ochre could be modified with tiny amounts of yellow or green to suggest different lighting conditions, ages, or emotional states. The master painter guards these formulations as carefully as any military secret. You notice small clay vessels containing what appear to be common cooking spices, but these serve specialized artistic purposes. Saffron, worth its weight in silver, creates yellows of incredible intensity and permanence. Turmeric provides cheaper yellow options for less critical applications. Dragon's blood, the dark red resin from distant palm trees, adds depth to shadow areas in ways that mineral pigments cannot achieve. The workshop maintains separate grinding stones for different types of materials. Harder stones work well for crushing minerals, but they contaminate organic pigments with unwanted particles. Softer limestone mortars preserve the purity of plant-based colors, but wear away too quickly under the pressure needed for tough minerals. The choice of grinding surface affects the final pigment quality, as much as the raw materials themselves. Temperature control during pigment preparation requires knowledge that approaches ancient science. Some materials must be ground in cool morning air to prevent heat damage. Others benefit from gentle warming that helps release their color more completely. The workshop schedules different preparation tasks throughout the day to take advantage of naturally changing temperatures, maximizing the quality of each pigment batch. Most people think Roman painters simply mixed whatever colours they wanted, but actually certain pigment combinations create chemical reactions that destroy both materials. Lead-based whites react with sulfur-containing reds, gradually turning black over time. Some copper greens fade when mixed with certain iron yellows. The workshop's written records include extensive lists of compatible and incompatible combinations, knowledge gained through centuries of experimentation and occasional expensive failures. The import network that supplies the workshop reveals the true scale of Roman commercial reach. Indigo arrives from India after journeys lasting over a year. Red ochre comes from Greek islands where the best deposits produce colours unavailable elsewhere. Amber, burned and powdered for golden glazes, travels from Baltic shores through barbarian territories to reach Roman markets. Each pigment carries stories of distant peoples, dangerous voyages, and commercial relationships that span the known world. You observe the careful testing procedures that ensure pigment quality before use. Small amounts are mixed with water and painted on pottery shards, then exposed to sunlight for days to check for fading. Others are heated gently to simulate the chemical changes that might occur during application. Only materials that pass these tests earn approval for use on expensive commissions. The workshop's relationship with local suppliers reveals fascinating economic networks. Certain earth pigments come from specific clay deposits within a day's walk of Rome, but even these require careful selection and processing. Not all yellow ochre possesses the same intensity or stability. Red earth from different hillsides varies in hue and covering power. Local knowledge about the best seasonal timing for collecting these materials passes between workshops like trade secrets. Apprentices learn to recognize authentic materials versus cheaper substitutes that dishonest traders might attempt to sell. Real ultramarine has a distinctive crystal structure visible under magnification. Genuine saffron produces specific color reactions when mixed with alkaline solutions. This knowledge protects the workshop's reputation and ensures that expensive commissions meet client expectations. The storage and aging of certain pigments requires understanding that approaches alchemical knowledge. Lead white improves with age, becoming smoother and more workable after months of proper storage. Some earth pigments develop richer tones when kept damp in sealed containers. Organic materials like madder lake actually increase in colour intensity during the first year after preparation, reaching peak quality long after initial creation. You can smell the distinctive metallic scent that rises from containers of ground minerals, each one different despite their similar appearance. Iron oxides carry the earthy smell of rain on stone. Copper-based pigments have a sharp, almost electric odour. Lead compounds produce a sweetish smell that experienced workers have learned to associate with danger, though they cannot explain why prolonged exposure causes illness. The workshop's colour matching capabilities rival those of any modern laboratory. Master colorists can recreate specific hues from memory, adjusting ratios by eye and touch to achieve exact matches across multiple sessions. This skill allows them to continue work on large frescoes over many days, while maintaining perfect colour consistency, a technical achievement that wealthy Roman clients demanded, but rarely understood or appreciated. As morning progresses toward midday, the workshop fills with the quiet concentration of craftsmen who understand they are working with materials more precious than jewels, using techniques more sophisticated than most Roman engineering, creating colours that will outlive empires. The wall before you breathes with subtle moisture, its surface alive in ways that most observers never recognise. Steam rises almost imperceptibly from the fresh lime plaster as chemical reactions continue beneath the smooth white surface. This living canvas will accept paint for only a few precious hours before hardening into permanence, creating a deadline more unforgiving than any Roman magistrate's court schedule. An experienced plasterer runs his palm across yesterday's brown coat, feeling for imperfections that must be corrected before applying today's intonaco. His weathered fingers detect variations in texture invisible to untrained eyes. A slight depression here, a barely perceptible bump there, flaws that would telegraph through the final painting layer and ruin the illusion of perfect architectural space that wealthy Romans demanded from their walls. The lime putty awaiting application has aged in covered pits for nearly 2 years. Most people think Romans mixed plaster fresh each day like modern cement, but actually the finest workshops aged their lime putty like wine, understanding that time transformed harsh quicklime into a material smooth as silk and strong as stone. The putty develops a creamy consistency that holds pigment without bleeding or streaking, crucial for the delicate colour work that will follow. You watch as 2 apprentices lift the heavy wooden tub containing today's intonaco mixture. Their movements are synchronized from months of practice, understanding that any jar or sudden motion could introduce air bubbles that would create weak spots in the finished surface. The mixture gleams like fresh snow, marble dust ground to powder so fine it passes through silk cloth without leaving residue. The master plasterer tests the wall's readiness by pressing a bronze tool against the brown coat surface. The slight give under pressure tells him the underlying layer retains exactly the right amount of moisture to bond chemically with the new application. Too dry and the layers will separate eventually, causing expensive paintings to flake away in sheets. Too wet and the fresh plaster will slide off the wall like melted wax. Temperature and humidity readings require skills that rival those of Roman augurs reading bird flight patterns. The plasterer observes how quickly water droplets evaporate from a test surface, how the morning air feels against his dampened palm, where the shadows hold moisture longer than usual today. These environmental factors determine how much wall area can be plastered and painted before the material becomes unworkable. The application begins with movements that appear deceptively simple but require years to master. The plasterer's wooden trowel glides across the surface with practiced rhythm, spreading intonaco in thin, even layers that build up gradually to the perfect thickness. Too thick, and the material cracks as it dries. Too thin, and the underlying brown coat shows through, creating colour variations that will haunt the finished painting. Most people imagine Roman walls as solid stone, but actually the finest villa interiors featured hollow construction that provided insulation and prevented moisture problems that plagued earlier building techniques. Between the outer stone wall and inner plaster surface lies a cavity filled with broken pottery shards and lightweight volcanic pumice. This construction required specialized knowledge of how different materials expand and contract with temperature changes. You can hear the soft scraping sounds as apprentices prepare the wall edges with special attention. Where fresco meets ceiling or floor, the plaster must feather to perfect thinness while maintaining structural integrity. These transition zones often failed first in poorly executed work, revealing the amateur workshops that wealthy Romans learned to avoid through bitter experience with cracking and peeling paint. The timing pressure creates an atmosphere unlike anywhere else in Roman society. Once intonaco application begins, the workshop operates under deadlines more absolute than military campaigns. The chemical clock cannot be stopped, slowed, or reset. Lime begins converting to calcium carbonate the moment it contacts air, and this process determines everything that follows. Masters plan each day's work area based on how much painting can be completed before the plaster hardens beyond use. The surface preparation reveals sophisticated understanding of optics and perception that rivals knowledge possessed by Roman architects and engineers. The final smoothing must create a surface so perfect that painted architectural details will appear genuinely three-dimensional under varying light conditions. Subtle irregularities that seem invisible during application become obvious flaws when shadows fall across the finished painting at different times of day. Water plays a crucial role that extends far beyond simple mixing. The plasterer keeps containers of clean water at precise temperatures, using them to control the drying rate in different areas of the wall. Cooler water slows the chemical reaction in sections requiring detailed work, while slightly warmer water accelerates setting in areas that need to harden quickly. This temperature control allows painters to work complex compositions that would be impossible with uniform drying rates. You observe the careful integration of reinforcement materials that prevent cracking as the plaster dries and ages. Goat hair, chopped to precise lengths, distributes throughout the mixture like a network of tiny ropes that absorb stress and prevent catastrophic failures. The hair must be perfectly clean, free of oils that would prevent proper bonding, and aged to remove organic compounds that might decay and create voids in the finished surface. The master plasterer's movements reveal knowledge of structural engineering that most Roman builders never acquired. He understands how plaster stress patterns develop as walls settle and building materials respond to seasonal temperature changes. The intonaco application follows specific patterns that distribute stress evenly, preventing the crack lines that would eventually destroy expensive painted decoration. Different wall orientations require different plaster formulations and application techniques. North-facing walls that never receive direct sunlight need mixtures with higher lime content to compensate for slower drying conditions. South-facing surfaces exposed to intense afternoon heat require modifications that prevent too rapid moisture loss. East and west walls face unique challenges as moving shadows create uneven drying patterns throughout the day. The workshop maintains detailed records of successful plaster formulations for different conditions, though this knowledge remains closely guarded within the craft tradition. Wooden tablets covered with coded notations specify precise ratios of lime putty, marble dust, and various additives for different applications. These recipes represent generations of accumulated wisdom about how materials behave under Roman climate conditions. You notice subtle variations in the intonaco mixture as work progresses across the wall surface. Areas destined for architectural details receive slightly coarser marble dust that provides better adhesion for thick paint applications. Sections planned for delicate flesh tones get the finest possible marble powder that creates mirror-smooth surfaces for subtle colour gradations. This level of preparation planning requires coordination between plasterers and painters that extends months into the future. The chemical transformation happening within the wet plaster fascinates because it represents one of the few irreversible processes in Roman construction. Unlike wood that can be recut or metal that can be reforged, plaster chemistry moves in only one direction. The carbonation reaction that hardens lime mortar cannot be undone, making every application decision permanent. This finality creates pressure that sharpens focus and eliminates casual approaches to the work. Moisture management becomes critical as the morning progresses and ambient humidity changes with rising temperatures. The master plasterer adjusts ventilation by opening or closing wooden shutters, controlling air circulation to maintain optimal drying conditions. Too much airflow creates surface crusting that prevents proper paint adhesion. Too little allows excessive moisture retention that delays the painting schedule. The integration between successive plaster layers requires understanding of chemistry that approaches ancient science. Each layer must bond completely with the previous one, while maintaining its own structural integrity. The Oricchio foundation provides strength, the brown coat creates smoothness, and the intonaco delivers the perfect painting surface. Failure at any interface dooms the entire system to eventual collapse. You can see tiny bubbles of carbon dioxide escaping from the wet plaster surface as the line carbonation reaction proceeds. These barely visible signs tell experienced craftsmen exactly how much working time remains before the surface becomes too hard to accept paint properly. The chemical process cannot be rushed or delayed significantly, making scheduling absolutely critical to workshop success. Tool maintenance assumes special importance because plaster chemistry attacks metal implements used in application. Bronze tools resist corrosion better than iron, but even bronze requires careful cleaning and oiling after each use. Wooden implements must be seasoned with specific oils that prevent lime absorption while avoiding contamination of future plaster batches. The workshop maintains separate tool sets for different types of work to prevent cross-contamination. The surface testing techniques used to determine painting readiness would impress Roman physicians with their precision. The master plasterer touches the wall with different materials to assess hardness development. A goose feather dragged across the surface reveals when the plaster has reached the perfect consistency for fine detail work. A bronze stylus pressed gently into the material shows whether it will accept heavy paint applications without deformation. Quality control during application requires constant vigilance because problems discovered later cannot be corrected without destroying completed work. The plasterer inspects each trowel load for proper consistency, discarding mixtures that show signs of premature setting or contamination. He watches for colour changes in the wet surface that might indicate chemical problems or foreign material intrusion. The workshop's understanding of seasonal variations in plaster behaviour rivals astronomical knowledge possessed by Roman calendar keepers. Winter applications require different timing and techniques than summer work. Spring humidity creates unique challenges that autumn dryness does not present. Masters schedule major projects around these natural cycles, understanding that fighting seasonal conditions leads to inferior results regardless of skill level. As the intonaco cures, microscopic crystals of calcium carbonate begin forming throughout the matrix, creating the incredibly durable surface that will preserve painted decoration for centuries. This crystallization process, invisible to Roman eyes but understood through generations of experience, transforms wet lime mortar into something approaching natural stone in hardness and permanence. The race against time has begun in earnest now, as the first sections of fresh plaster await the brushes that will bring them to life with colour before the brief window of workability closes forever. The wet plaster awaits its transformation into windows that will open onto worlds both real and imagined. Around the workshop, preparatory drawings reveal the stories that wealthy Romans chose to surround themselves with daily. These are not random decorations, but carefully selected narratives that communicate social status, religious devotion, and personal aspirations to anyone who enters these private spaces. On a wooden board propped against the wall, a Sinopia artist sketches the outline of Venus rising from sea foam, her figure positioned to catch the morning light that streams through the villa's eastern windows. Most people think Romans painted mythological scenes simply for decoration, but actually these images served as sophisticated theological statements about divine favour and personal protection. Venus in a bedroom promised marital harmony and fertility, while her presence in a dining room suggested the host's connection to divine beauty and pleasure. You can observe the master painter consulting a collection of wax tablets that contain standardized iconographic elements. These visual vocabularies ensured that painted stories communicated clearly to educated viewers while avoiding accidentally offensive combinations of symbols. A peacock painted near Juno's image reinforced the goddess's protective powers, while the same bird near Minerva might suggest wisdom ascending to divine heights. The workshop maintains an extensive library of mythological reference materials that would rival collections owned by Roman poets and historians. Papyrus scrolls contain detailed descriptions of how various gods and heroes should appear. What attributes must accompany each figure? Which colours enhance their divine nature? This knowledge base allows painters to create narratives that satisfy both artistic beauty and religious accuracy. Apprentices practice figure drawing on broken pottery shards, learning to capture the flowing drapery that distinguishes divine figures from mortal ones. The way fabric falls across Venus's body must suggest movement through water, while Mars's military cloak should appear heavy with the weight of bronze armour. These subtle details communicate character and status more effectively than facial features, which remain idealized according to Greek artistic conventions. The garden scenes that Romans treasured above almost all other domestic decoration reveal fascinating insights into their relationship with nature. You watch an artist carefully painting individual leaves on a painted lemon tree, each one observed from real specimens brought into the workshop for study. These botanical paradises allowed wealthy Romans to enjoy eternal spring within their homes, defying the seasonal limitations that constrained actual gardens. Most people imagine these garden frescoes as simple landscape painting, but actually they functioned as complex philosophical statements about the relationship between civilization and wild nature. Painted gardens presented nature perfected through human intelligence, with exotic plants arranged in harmonious compositions, impossible in real life. Birds from different continents perch together. Flowering plants from various seasons bloom simultaneously, creating idealized environments that demonstrated Roman dominance over the natural world. The selection of plants and animals for garden frescoes followed symbolic codes as precise as military standards. Roses indicated love and beauty, but also the brevity of life. Pomegranates suggested fertility and abundance while hinting at mysteries of death and rebirth. Peacocks displayed divine protection, while doves promised peace and domestic harmony. Wealthy Romans could read these painted gardens like books, understanding layers of meaning invisible to modern observers. You notice the artist working on architectural elements that frame the garden scenes, painting columns and doorways that seem to extend the room's actual space into imaginary distances. These trompe-l'oeil techniques required mathematical understanding of perspective that rivaled knowledge possessed by Roman surveyors and engineers. The painted architecture must align perfectly with the room's real proportions to maintain the illusion of expanded space. The workshop produces different categories of garden paintings for different types of rooms. Dining areas receive scenes emphasizing abundance and pleasure, with fruit trees heavy with harvest and fountains flowing with crystal water. Bedrooms feature more intimate garden spaces with secluded groves and quiet pools that suggest romantic encounters. Reception halls display grand landscape vistas that demonstrate the owner's sophisticated taste and extensive travels. Religious themes in domestic decoration serve purposes that extend far beyond simple piety. A painted shrine to the household gods provides daily reminders of family obligations and ancestral connections. Images of protective deities offer psychological comfort in uncertain times, while advertising the family's divine patronage to visitors. These religious elements integrate seamlessly with mythological and natural themes to create comprehensive decorative programs. The portrayal of mystery religion symbols reveals how Romans navigated between public religious obligations and private spiritual beliefs. Dionysiac imagery appears frequently in villa decoration, but encoded in ways that communicate meaning to initiates, while remaining innocuous to casual observers. Grapevines might represent simple agricultural abundance to some viewers, while suggesting spiritual transformation to those familiar with mystery cult teachings. You observe an artist painting a scene of Diana hunting in moonlit forests, her silver arrows gleaming as she pursues a magnificent stag through painted trees that seem to rustle with actual movement. This scene functions on multiple levels, celebrating the goddess's power while suggesting the villa owner's own prowess in the hunt. The nocturnal setting adds mystery and romance that transforms hunting from mere sport into spiritual communion with divine forces. The integration of Egyptian themes into Roman domestic decoration reflects the empire's complex relationship with conquered cultures. Painted Nile scenes with exotic birds and crocodiles demonstrate Roman control over distant territories, while satisfying fascination with mysterious foreign religions. Isis appears frequently in villa frescoes, but adapted to Roman sensibilities that emphasize her protective maternal aspects rather than her more threatening powers. Seasonal cycles painted in dining rooms create temporal frameworks that enhance the dining experience throughout the year. Spring scenes featuring flowering almonds and nesting birds complement early season meals, while autumn paintings of grape harvest and wine production celebrate the season's abundance. These cyclical decorations help wealthy Romans maintain connection with natural rhythms despite their increasingly urbanized lifestyles. The workshop's approach to painting human figures in mythological scenes reveals sophisticated understanding of psychology and emotion. Divine figures appear slightly larger than human scale, their proportions idealized according to mathematical ratios that create subconscious impressions of perfection. Mortal characters show more naturalistic proportions and expressions, creating visual hierarchies that communicate cosmic order through artistic means. Most people think Roman painters copied Greek artistic styles without innovation, but actually, villa frescoes demonstrate remarkable creative adaptation of classical themes to contemporary concerns. Traditional mythological stories receive new interpretations that address Roman anxieties about political stability, family succession, and relationship with the gods. Perseus rescuing Andromeda becomes a metaphor for Roman intervention in foreign conflicts, while Odysseus's homecoming resonates with military families separated by long campaigns. The colour symbolism employed in religious and mythological scenes follows codes as precise as those used in official state art. Purple garments indicate divine or imperial connection, while blue suggests heavenly realms beyond mortal reach. Gold details catch lamplight to create supernatural glowing effects that enhance the sense of divine presence. These colour choices communicate meaning automatically to viewers trained in Roman visual culture. You can see the artist working on background details that create environmental context for mythological narratives. The cave where Venus first emerged from sea foam receives careful attention to rock textures and water effects that make the divine birth seem geologically plausible. Sacred groves where gods meet mortals feature tree species actually found in Italian landscapes, grounding fantastic stories in familiar natural settings. The workshop produces specialized paintings for rooms dedicated to specific activities within the villa complex. Library walls feature scenes of Apollo and the Muses, suggesting divine inspiration for scholarly pursuits. Exercise rooms display images of athletic competitions and heroic physical achievements. Bath complexes receive marine themes with sea gods and nymphs that complement the water-based activities performed in these spaces. Private devotional images painted in bedroom alcoves reveal the intimate relationship between Romans and their personal protective deities. These small-scale works often achieve higher artistic quality than public religious art because they address individual spiritual needs rather than community religious obligations. Personal patron gods receive portrayal that emphasizes their protective and nurturing aspects rather than their awesome divine powers. The integration of family portrait elements into mythological scenes creates uniquely Roman artistic innovations. Wealthy patrons commission paintings that insert their own family members into traditional divine narratives, suggesting their participation in cosmic dramas. Children appear as cherubs attending Venus, while wives take roles as minor goddesses in scenes of divine abundance and protection. You observe the careful attention given to architectural settings that frame mythological narratives. Divine palaces feature construction details borrowed from actual Roman engineering, making supernatural realms seem achievable through human technology and ambition. Sacred temples in painted scenes reproduce real architectural orders and proportions, connecting mythological events to familiar religious experiences. The workshop's treatment of landscape elements in mythological scenes reveals Romans' complex relationship with wilderness and civilization. Divine figures appear most powerful when shown in natural settings, but these painted wilds are carefully organized according to human aesthetic principles. Even Dionysus's wild forests follow compositional rules that create harmony rather than chaos, reflecting Roman belief that divine power operates through cosmic order rather than arbitrary caprice. Garden paradise themes extend beyond simple botanical display to create comprehensive visions of perfected nature that address Roman anxieties about urban living and imperial responsibilities. These painted Edens offer psychological escape while reinforcing cultural values about human dominance over natural forces and divine approval for Roman civilization's achievements. As afternoon light begins to shift across the workshop walls, the painted stories take on different meanings, their symbolic content changing subtly with the moving shadows that transform divine narratives into living dramas played out daily in the private spaces of Roman domestic life. The afternoon light filters through the workshop windows with a different quality now, softer and warmer as the day moves toward evening. The fresco that began as blank wet plaster this morning has transformed into a living world where mythological figures seem to breathe within their painted garden paradise. You can see how all the morning's careful preparations have culminated in this moment when art and chemistry unite to create something that will outlast the empire itself. The apprentices who ground precious pigments before dawn now clean their brushes with quiet satisfaction, watching colours swirl in bronze washing bowls like miniature sunsets. Their calloused hands tell the story of a craft that demands both physical endurance and artistic sensitivity, where a slip of the wrist can destroy hours of meticulous work, or where perfect technique can create effects that seem touched by divine inspiration. Steam no longer rises from the completed sections of wall, where the lime plaster has accepted its final burden of colour and begun the slow crystallization process that will lock these images into permanence. The chemical marriage between wet lime and mineral pigment has created bonds stronger than the stone walls that support them. In centuries to come, when the villa's wooden beams have rotted and its bronze fixtures have corroded, these painted stories will still speak to viewers about Roman dreams and aspirations. You observe the master painter making his final inspection of today's work, his experienced eyes catching details that would escape casual notice. A shadow under Apollo's chin needs slight deepening to enhance the divine figure's noble bearing. The leaves on a painted lemon tree require tiny highlights that will make them seem to shimmer with morning dew. These refinements separate master craftsmanship from merely competent work, the difference between decoration that pleases for a season and art that captivates for generations. The workshop's social hierarchy, so carefully maintained throughout the day's labour, softens as evening approaches. Master and apprentice share the satisfaction of work well completed, understanding that tomorrow will bring new challenges, but tonight offers the rare pleasure of achievement recognised and appreciated. The youngest apprentices, their water buckets finally set aside, gather around the master painter to hear explanations of techniques they observed but could not yet understand. The sacred pigments that began the day as raw minerals and exotic imports now live within the villa walls as permanent residents of this domestic paradise. Egyptian blue captures the eternal sky above painted gardens where no season changes and no flowers fade. Cinnabar red flows through the robes of Venus like divine blood made visible. Gold leaf, applied with brushes finer than human hair, catches lamplight to create halos that seem to generate their own celestial illumination. The living canvas that demanded such careful preparation has accepted its painted burden with chemical precision, transforming wet lime mortar into a surface as durable as marble and as smooth as silk. The multiple layers of plaster, each serving its crucial structural purpose, now function as a unified foundation for artistic visions that extend the villa's physical boundaries into realms limited only by imagination and mythological tradition. The stories painted on these walls will speak to their inhabitants in ways both conscious and subliminal. Venus rising from sea foam will greet the villa owner each morning with promises of beauty and divine favour. Garden paradises filled with exotic birds and perpetually flowering plants will provide psychological escape from the noise and stress of Roman urban life. Mythological heroes conquering monsters and winning divine brides will offer inspiration during times of personal challenge and uncertainty. Most people who visit this villa in years to come will see only beautiful decoration, missing the sophisticated layers of meaning embedded within every painted element. They will not recognize the astronomical knowledge required to align seasonal garden scenes with the room's natural lighting patterns. They will overlook the theological subtleties that place protective deities in positions where their painted presence can offer maximum spiritual comfort. They will appreciate the artistry while remaining unaware of the chemical mastery that makes such permanent beauty possible. The workshop tradition that created these masterpieces carries within itself centuries of accumulated wisdom about materials, techniques, and artistic vision. Each apprentice who learned to grind lapis lazuli into ultramarine blue received knowledge that connected him to craftsmen working in workshops across the Mediterranean world. Each master painter who developed new approaches to mythological narrative contributed to an artistic heritage that would influence decorative arts long after the fall of Rome itself. The religious and domestic themes interweaving throughout these painted walls reveal Romans as people seeking the same psychological and spiritual satisfactions that humans have always pursued through art. They wanted their private spaces to reflect their highest aspirations, their deepest beliefs, their most cherished relationships with family and gods. The technical brilliance of fresco painting provided the means, but the emotional and spiritual content provided the motivation for achievements that continue to move viewers 2,000 years later. As shadows lengthen across the workshop floor, you can see apprentices carefully storing unused pigments in their proper containers, understanding that these precious materials represent not just monetary value, but accumulated knowledge about colour, light, and artistic effect. The brushes hang on their wooden pegs like soldiers' weapons after battle, ready for tomorrow's campaigns against blank walls and artistic challenges yet to be faced. The master painter rolls up the preparatory drawings that guided today's work, these cartoons that preserve successful compositions for future use. Roman workshops understood that artistic innovation built upon established foundations rather than rejecting previous achievements. Tomorrow's mythological scenes will benefit from today's discoveries about how painted figures catch light, how landscape elements create depth, how colour relationships enhance emotional impact. The lime water that seemed so urgent and demanding during the morning's application has settled into patient permanence, its chemical transformation complete. What began as a race against time has concluded with victory over time itself, creating images that will survive political upheavals, natural disasters, and the slow erosion of centuries. The workshop's daily battle against the constraints of chemistry and physics has produced another victory in humanity's long campaign to make beauty permanent. The villa owner who commissioned this work will soon walk through rooms transformed from simple architectural spaces into environments that transport him daily into worlds of mythological adventure, natural perfection, and divine protection. Every morning he will wake surrounded by painted gardens where eternal spring reigns and exotic birds sing songs that exist only in artistic imagination. Every evening he will dine in the company of gods and heroes whose painted presence elevates ordinary meals into occasions touched by cosmic significance. The economic networks that supplied this workshop with precious materials from across the known world demonstrate the interconnectedness of Roman civilization at its height. Lapis lazuli from Afghan mountains, cinnabar from Spanish mines, ivory from African elephants, and saffron from Mediterranean hillsides all converged in this small Roman workshop to create art that transcended the political boundaries and cultural differences that might otherwise have kept these materials separated forever. The craftsmen who created this fresco carry home tonight not just their daily wages, but the deeper satisfaction of having participated in something larger than individual ambition or temporary profit. They have helped create beauty that will outlive them, stories that will continue speaking to future generations about Roman dreams and achievements. Their skilled hands have transformed raw materials into visions that expand human possibility and celebrate the marriage between technical mastery and artistic inspiration. The workshop grows quiet now as the last tools are cleaned and stored, the last apprentices dismissed to their evening meals and rest. The painted walls themselves seem to settle into contemplative silence, their images complete, but their stories just beginning. Tomorrow will bring new commissions, new challenges, new opportunities to transform blank surfaces into windows opening onto worlds both real and imagined. The Roman fresco workshop represents something beautiful about human creativity and determination. In a world often focused on military conquest and political power, these quiet spaces dedicated themselves entirely to making life more beautiful, meaningful, and spiritually rich. They understood that civilization's highest achievements come not from dominating others, but from creating beauty that enriches everyone who encounters it. As night falls over the 7 hills of Rome, the workshop's latest creation joins the vast gallery of painted walls that transform the empire's domestic spaces into realms of perpetual beauty and meaning. The ancient chemistry that bound pigment to lime will continue its patient work of preservation, maintaining these images through the long centuries ahead while empires rise and fall around them. Thank you for joining us on this peaceful journey through the Roman fresco workshop at dawn. If you enjoyed our quiet exploration of ancient artistry and are still awake, please check out our other historical documentaries where we continue wandering through the gentle corridors of the past. And if you have fallen asleep somewhere along the way, rest well and enjoy the campfire.